What are the next 5 years of Xi Jinping's presidency going to be like? Will China attack Taiwan? Will the PLA continue its aggressive military posture against India? How will the relations between China and the United States evolve? These are the big questions, the answers to which will determine not just the future of the Middle Kingdom, but also, in many ways, the future of the world. Joining me on this special broadcast to talk about the world's most powerful man is one of the world's top experts on Xi Jinping. Professor Kerry Brown has written more than 20 books on China, including 3 studying the mind and the moves of President Xi. Kerry Brown is the author of Xi, A Study in Power, The World According to Xi, Everything You Need to Know About the New China, and CEO China, The Rise of Xi Jinping. Professor Brown, at a time when the world's attention is riveted on Beijing, it's a pleasure that you could take out time to speak to us on India Today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Since you study the mind and the moves of President Xi Jinping as closely as you do, could you at the outset lay out your vision of what you think President Xi is likely to be like over the next 5 years? What should the world expect from the world's most powerful man?
Well, I think we'll get more of what we've already got. I mean, there's quite a lot of predictability now. The speech that Xi Jinping made at the beginning of the 20th Congress on the 16th of October was a reaffirmation. There was no introduction of anything particularly new or surprising. His core vision has remained, I think, very stable, and that is, first of all, an absolute conviction in the importance, authority and power of the Communist Party of China, which he represents, and secondly, a strong nationalism, a desire for China to be a strong, rich country, dominant in its region, and able to have its own specific kind of role in the world. I think these are the things that we'll see in the next 5 years, because these are the things we've already seen in the last 10 in which he's been in power.
Deng Xiaoping introduced the idea that you could be in charge only for 2 terms. Xi Jinping now overturning that. Is there any way of knowing at all how long Xi Jinping would like to stay on in power? How long could he stay on in power?
It's very hard to say. If there are viable successors who appear at this Congress, the 5-yearly meeting of the Communist Party where leadership changes happen, then we will kind of know that there's a succession plan. I don't think that there will this time. It's hard to say whether in the next 5 years someone will suddenly emerge as more important. I think there's a sort of conviction that stability is necessary and that this leadership should continue as it is until at least the next Congress. Of course, there's lots of questions there. Is he able to do this in terms of his health? Will he actually not become a bit like Putin, more and more autocratic, more and more kind of unreliable in his judgments? These are big, big things. But at the moment, I think the commitment is to keep him there, for him to stay there for the foreseeable future.
How has he changed between the time he took charge as the leader of the Communist Party to the time when he's stamping his control over the world's most powerful party at a time when China is very different from the way it was under Mao or Deng Xiaoping? How has the leadership style of Xi Jinping evolved in your view?
Well, I think he was pretty confident from the first day. In November 2012, November the 15th, he emerged that day at the 18th Party Congress then as the key leader. He spoke for a few minutes and had a very clear idea of what he was going to do in his leadership. And that's never really stopped. His confidence has been quite striking. It's also been unsettling, of course. People find this, kind of autocratic kind of personality that he seems to have, really kind of problematic. I think the things that's changed probably is the world around him has changed. America has become more divided. Europe has become or continued to be quite divided. We now have, of course, the impact of the pandemic, the very serious war that Russia is waging on Ukraine, I mean, these have made a much more uncertain environment and an awareness of issues like climate change and their urgency. And I think that's made his authority, in Chinese eyes at least, or the Communist Party's eyes, even more authority. These are problems that have, in a sense, meant that he has become even stronger because they have meant a strong response.
The Chinese economy has suffered hard because of Xi Jinping's zero COVID policy. There's a lot of global commentary around how this was being done and not changed with an eye on that Communist Party Congress. Do you think now the Chinese economy will start opening up more, and a lot of these restrictions, there's no way of knowing for sure, but a lot of these restrictions which were set to be kept in place so that there's no disturbance ahead of his re-election, do you think those will likely ease now?
Well, he said in his speech that zero COVID will not stop. I don't think there'll be a dramatic change, at least in the first few weeks and months. Possibly next year there will be some kinds of relaxations, that they'll be presented probably as innovations and, responses to a changing situation. But the political commitment to having zero COVID is very, very strong. The economic situation in China is extremely difficult at the moment. He committed to a 5.5% GDP increase in the next few years, and that's ambitious. But I think that the Chinese economy will decide a lot of the political decisions, because while Xi Jinping is not necessarily solely interested in the economy as a political tool is very important to him and the party, and it needs to be in a good state, which clearly it isn't at the moment.
Now, how do you assess Xi's ability to deal with the challenges the Chinese economy faces? It's difficult from the outside to read what's happening, because there are so many wheels within wheels, so much black hole from where light doesn't emerge fully, given the fact that we know of the real estate bubble, the debt crisis, slowing growth. How do you see Xi trying to deal with some of those challenges?
Well, I mean, a centralized system such as his does have many policy tools it can use. I mean, I think obviously the big problem is slowing growth, and there's many contributions to that. One of which is the kind of state of the outside world, and that's had an impact on China. The disappearance of yet more of China's export markets. All these things don't help. He, in his speech, made clear that China is going to put a lot of effort into technological innovation, into education, into upgrading its economic system. So, it's not just about manufacturing. It's going to be more and more about service precision, more and more about creating new innovations technologically in China, and having a better kind of pool of technology. This is a long-term plan, but I think it's going to accelerate. So we can expect to see significant government investment in education, particularly in STEM subjects, so that there is less reliance on the world outside for this technology, and more autonomy for China. I think that's an absolutely key thing that this administration is now working on, because it's no longer trusting of America or Europe or others as technological partners. It just regards this as politicized, and it's going to try and go it alone more and more. Of course, it won't be easy, but that's what it's going to try and do.
To your mind, how does she see the relationship with India? When Prime Minister Modi got elected to power, the sense that was sought to be conveyed was that President Xi has a favorable disposition towards India. We've seen post-2020, the People's Liberation Army amassed along the line of actual control, continuing its aggressive military postures even today. From the way that you see it, how are China-India relations likely to evolve over the next 5 years?
Well, obviously India and China are, kind of big potential competitors, but they have no choice because of their huge shared border, but to collaborate, to try and cooperate with each other. And I think Modi, Prime Minister Modi, and President Xi Jinping, have put effort into building a personal relationship, which seems to be relatively positive. Um, the complexity of the relationships, however, is going to really be from the fact that obviously India is becoming a stronger economic player, much more prominent than it used to be. It's likely that quite soon India's population will exceed China's, so that's sort of quite a symbolic moment. And it's also true that this relationship is not one where there's a great deal, certainly on China's side, of understanding. I think that China's not invested much in trying to understand India. Its Belt and Road Initiative has obviously not been something that India has particularly embraced. China's tried to balance its relations with Pakistan, India, and of course other powers in the region. I mean, these are complex things that are kind of ones it's not particularly, I think, focused and prioritized before. But I think generally, with all of the issues that China has with America, with particularly kind of America and the European alliance system, very difficult relations with Russia at the moment, I think it would want a reasonably predictable relationship with India, something that is reasonably free of problems. I think it would be in the business, therefore, of creating quite a strong collaboration with India if it could.
What you're saying is logical, except that facts on the ground seem to dispute that theory, because you've got the PLA amassed even now aggressively both in front of the Ladakh border and in Arunachal Pradesh. Those fortifications continuing, China investing very significantly in building border infrastructure and new military garrisons, leading many in India to wonder, where is she going with this military buildup?
Yeah, I mean, Xi's politics is very nationalistic. I mean, look, if I was an advisor to Xi Jinping, I would say that this should be ratcheted down. I mean, maybe after the Congress it will be. I mean, in the broad picture, China's issues with India are not as problematic as they are at all with America, for instance. But I mean, it's not an easy relationship, and the unresolved border dispute doesn't look like it's going to be resolved anytime soon. That will always be a cause of tension. So I think there will be problems. The issue is, are they big problems or manageable problems?
Okay. What do you think is likely to happen next on Taiwan? Everybody dissected Xi's speech very carefully, looking for clues on what could happen with Taiwan next. He's not broken any new ground. Is it because he intends to act and not speak, or do you think the fact that he hasn't made any more provocative statements suggests, at least for the next 5 years, he doesn't intend to move militarily against Taipei?
I think that all depends on what America in particular and Taiwan do. They both have elections in 2024, and that's going to be a difficult moment, because if you have an American president potentially who's going to be much more assertive on Taiwan and recognition of Taiwan, and you have a Taiwanese president who may also be assertive, then there's going to clearly be an enormous problem. I think China's aware that this is an issue where at the moment there is no easy resolution. A military solution would be a catastrophe for everyone. Russia and Ukraine has proved that war is a hugely risky adventure, and indeed an amphibious landing is far more difficult. So I don't see this leadership wanting to accelerate any action at the moment unless provoked. But of course, their nationalistic kind of philosophy means that this issue will not go away. I think they're just going to continue to try and apply pressure diplomatically on Taiwan and try and make sure that their interests are asserted with an idea of an outcome, but not a deadline for that outcome.
How do you see Beijing and Washington DC's relationship evolve over the next 5 years? That is the central relationship which defines in many ways the new emerging global order. We've seen Biden and Xi try to at least be in touch with each other, so it doesn't seem as if there's a complete communication breakdown, but there still is a lot of testiness and edginess in that relationship.
I don't think it's going to be an easy relationship in the next 5 years. The only question is, will it get worse? I mean, it's pretty bad at the moment. And so, this is not a very ambitious target. The main thing is to make sure it doesn't get worse. As I said, the big event will be the election in 2024, the end of 2024. and what happens as a result of that. I mean, that could be a new candidate who could even be more assertive on China, and things will just kind of deteriorate. Um, the issue really is that America is obviously anxious and at some points almost panicking about China, which is too strong now to just manage. And it's not quite worked out a way of, kind of allowing China space in some areas, but, really kind of making sure that it asserts its interest in others. This is not going to be something that can be resolved. This is the new geopolitics. We have to be realistic about this and manage this. We can't resolve it. We just have to manage it. And the question is America and China, able to do that, or will they be overwhelmed by their incompatibility sometimes?
According to you, when you research the initial days of Xi Jinping, his rise in the party, what makes him different from all the communist leaders before him? Not since Mao Zedong has any one Chinese leader concentrated so much power in his hands. Not in the world is anyone else with this kind of power, with the absence of the kind of checks that would be there on a leader in a country like the United States or even in India. What makes Xi tick? What makes him different? What makes him special?
Well, there's a very, in my mind, simple answer to that. What makes him different is because China is different now. I mean, Mao Zedong was the ruler of China when it was a relatively small, undeveloped and marginalized economy. And Xi Jinping is the ruler of China when it's, in pole position to be the world's largest economy. Xi Jinping is the ruler of China when it's the biggest trading partner for 120 plus countries, when it's the world's second biggest military. There's so many things where China today is not like it was even, 20 years ago or 25 years ago. In 1989, the Chinese economy was 3% the size of the Chinese economy today. So this is a different place. It's like a driver who has gone from driving, a small kind of powered car to getting into, a high horsepower car with lots more kind of capacity. The driver might be the same, but the thing they're driving is totally different. Xi Jinping is, I think, a confident and assertive leader, that's for sure. But the basis of that is that he has a country which is so much more, powerful economically, geopolitically, and military than ever before.
One of the stories that made international headlines in the build-up to the Chinese Communist Party Congress was the banner which was displayed on a bridge in Beijing, protesting against Xi, protesting against zero COVID. What's your broad sense of how Chinese society and citizens think of Xi Jinping? How much support, in your view, does he have amongst the common people of China, and how many would like to push back against some of his policies if they had the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, the protest in Beijing at Sitong Bridge was, by a very brave individual, and maybe, kind of sort of extraordinary they did what they did. But I mean, we know what one person feels in China, but what the other 1.399 billion people think, not easy to say. I mean, I suspect, like anywhere, there's a spectrum of opinion. There are those who may be enthusiastic about him and his nationalism, and that might be a minority. There are those who are accepting because their lives are, broadly okay, and there are those who complain. But, there's a sense of inertia. Those who are absolutely opposed to him, again, are going to be a minority. This seems to me a normal spectrum in any society. Are the ones opposed to him going to ever get critical mass? It's very difficult. It would be a huge, huge, huge challenge. A lot will depend on the economy, because I think the more middle groups, which are the vast majority, may become more negative about the government as the economy goes through problems. But the Communist Party has one card it can always play, which is nationalism. It can always blame others for the position it's in. It can say that Chinese need to always sort of stand together. It's almost like a kind of quasi-war, situation. So I don't think that he is remotely under any threat at the moment. If the one person opposing him were sitting next to him on the Politburo, we have a different problem. But what's remarkable is there's no real evidence that that is the case. And the elite, at least, seem relatively unified around his leadership for whatever reason.
Okay, so let's build on that. Is there anyone you see at the Congress who you think could be the successor to Xi Jinping? Is that at all, I mean, given all, anybody else would say there's no way I know, but given your wealth of experience, would you like to hazard a guess, or one candidate or maybe a clutch of candidates who you think could be amongst those who are likely to replace Xi?
Very difficult. I mean, to be honest, the only person who has anything like his stature is his premier at the moment, Li Keqiang. Of course, he's likely either to retire or stay on in a new, different sort of position. Younger leaders, I mean, people like Hu Junhua or Wang Yang, I mean, slightly younger in Wang Yang's case, they have the experience, but I don't think anyone would look upon them as being groomed as a successor. Lower down, I mean, look, Xi Jinping was not really thought about before, almost like months before he really kind of, got the top slot in 2007. So maybe there are figures that, suddenly will emerge and everyone will say, yeah, these are really important figures. At the moment, though, I don't think Xi Jinping has any interest in giving any kind of, light to a successor, because it takes power from him, and he's not in that game at the moment.
Well, he is playing a game which he thinks is best for China, most certainly dangerous for the rest of the world, and definitely for India. We'll track all of Xi Jinping's moves. Professor Kerry Brown, it's been a pleasure talking to you and benefiting from your insights on the world's most powerful and also the world's most dangerous man. Thank you very much for joining us on the News Strike, sir.
Thank you very much.